Sorry, can you go back to the last point? I said here, the interdisciplinary agenda in research and review rebuilding is important in management analysis as well, as opposed to, or rather than, a generic management. I'm saying here, let's keep the business management principle. Let's also keep the public management principle. You can compare the approaches of these two principles, but it may not be wise to have a generic management, because with the generic management, one hardly recognizes the distinct approaches and characteristics of the management approach in the public sector and the business sector. The implication academically is, I continue to raise question whether it is wise to have a Master of Management as a generic degree rather than to retain the degree on public management and business management, recognizing that there are different approaches and we should retain the integrity of their differences and distinctions and see where they overlap. But I will respect the public management should retain its integrity. Next please, I will skip some of this. Please continue. Let me come to letter, alright. The Blackman-Scott literatures are establishing the difference between public and private. And I think these are self-explanatory, so I'll pass forward it. Alright, these are the distinctions between public and private, obviously. Public organizations owned and funded by government. On the other hand, private ones are funded through sales or private donations. The typology of organizations may be examined according to goals, structure, and decision process. And using these three criteria, you may arrive whether an organization is more public than private, or whether an organization is more private than public. Next, please. And this one is my favorite because Hack really challenges a number of things. He says, the massive market-driven mode of governance challenges public and publicness and reorients the state policies toward deregulation, privatization, and liberalization, aka the NPM, the new public management modalities. What is the consequence of all of this? One consequence is the diminished publicness of public service. The further consequences are the threatened openness, impartiality, and broader social impact of services and public goods. And there is a threatened public administration with the principle of business management as if dominating the management field when we say private sector is better than the public sector when it comes to public goods and public service delivery. And he questions that and says, is business management principle superior over public management? And he refuses to allow public administration to whittle itself away. What else? He says, the publicness suggests a universality of access to services and by all citizens, and the private management narrows down service recipients. Only those who are served are those who can afford the costs of services. The underprivileged, therefore, where we find many of them in the Philippines and in other developing countries, are not necessarily represented or included in services and preferences, and therefore the impact of public services gets narrower, weaker, and more limited. Now, there is a social role and a class bias responsiveness when we erode public trust in public services and the publicness. I have to wind up quickly, please. The implication also is that there is a continuous shrinking in the shrinking trust in public institutions. I'm sure public administration people don't want that. The accountability clause in contract covers accountability of service providers only to the users and the consumers, but if they exclude the poor who may need access to public goods and public services. Citizenship is weakened and diminished because the citizens are converted to mere consumers and clients in the market. Next please, I have to point towards the final statements and recommendations. What are the challenges to the scholars? The challenge to the scholar is to identify a common space of publicness and contribute to organization studies. The publicness would be a tool for strategic public management and organization mapping. Map the organizations, but do not kill public organizations just to say the private organizations are more effective, are on the rise, and are more dominant. Rather, show the complementarity of organizations rather than pit them with each other. And the public value approach would lead to strategic thinking. The scholars would also develop indicators and measures of such strategy approach. Next, please. I think I'm coming to my last slide. The scholars can draw modeling of publicness. And rather than saying there is a superiority of the market, that we replace the principles of public service, determine the differing roles of different institutions in delivering public service and public goods. And finally, the implication and the challenge to the policymakers and the practitioners is by regulation, by legislation, by resource allocation, and the implication of policies to social exclusion of the poor in market-oriented public service. I'm sorry, I have to stop here. Thank you very much. There is a paper that is with you, and I'm open to some questions later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, as Dean said, the papers are in your kit. They are in the USB in a nicely packaged. Okay. Kung gusto niyo basahin yung paper, go on. Unfortunately, we don't have that. Our next speaker is Dr. Maria Mendoza. You know, in the university system, the Philippine system, we share our talents with different units of the university. And Dr. Mendoza is a professor of public administration. At the same time, she's vice chancellor for academic affairs of the University of the Philippines Open University. And she is an expert on regulatory governance, modification of regulation, particularly for electricity markets, public enterprise reform, public-private partnership and privatization, fostering democratic governance and quality assurance and regulation, open and distance learning. She's going to tell you how to explore different areas and different methodologies for public administration education.
Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. My paper is on the challenges to the futures of public education. I divided my paper into three. Basically, public administration as a field of study and practice has undergone transformations, shifts, and movements in its paradigms, concepts, and approaches in teaching, research, and practice. My paper will try to do three things. First is to review the transformations in public administration. Okay. And then reflect on their implications in PA education and practice in the Philippines. And later, revisit both e-governance developments and challenges and the futures that they may bring. Reviewing the transformations of public as a field of practice intended to professionalize public practice, address development problems, reform societies, foster democracy, and serve public interest and welfare, we could see at least three major studies in the Philippines that look at these transformations. Carino mention three streams in the sense that these are sets of convergent concepts and approaches in the teaching, research, and practice of public administration. In the dominant particular periods, she mentioned four streams. These are, the first stream is the traditional public administration, the next is development administration, later is the genre of new public administration, and then the more recent, public administration and governance. Brillantes Jr. and Fernandez, meanwhile, divided the phases in the evolution of the field into only two. The traditional or classical PA from the 1800s to the 1950s, and modern PA from 1950s to present. The modern PA includes DepAd, New PA, New Public Management, Reinventing Government, and PA as Governance. Ocampo, meanwhile, in analyzing the cumulative rather than the successive shifts and movements in the discipline, proposed a continuing review of the changing paradigms that the field has adopted, reformed, reinvented, and rediscovered. He grouped the shifts into the following: from old or traditional PA to DepAd and new PA, public policy, implementation, and service delivery, new PM, and reinventing government, and the last, governance. In the latter shift, he focused on e-government in consideration of the digital era governance 21st century. The major shifts, streams, and transformations of public administration has influenced the way the theory and practice of public ad has undergone in the Philippines. In the academic front, these shifts and streams have influenced, for example, the manner by which the NCPA, the pioneer and recognized leader in the field of public ad in the Philippines, have revised, redesigned, and offered its curriculum, the expertise of the faculty members it has invited in its school, the researches and publications it has produced, and the extension and service activities it has implemented. Looking at the record of public administration over time, we would see in the curriculum the evolution as reflected in the fields of specialization. For the old traditional PA, we have fields of specialization in organization and management, personal administration, fiscal administration, and local government. For the modern PA and PM and governance, we have public policy and program administration, public enterprise management, spatial information management, and voluntary sector management. With regard to the faculty's expertise, looking at the different portfolio of the faculty members, you could see an expanded portfolio consisting of the following expertise: administrative theory and history, management, planning and control, ONF, fiscal ad, ethics and accountability, local governance, PA and development, comparative PA. Also, international political economy, public policy, public sector reform and privatization, government corporate governance, spatial and geoinformatics management, climate change, and environmental governance, regulatory governance, and citizenship and democracy.